Hi, I'm Kaylee, a librarian here at Mentor Public Library.
And I'm Meg, also a librarian, and welcome to this week's edition of All Booked Up with Cailey and Meg, where each week we give you a different recommendation related to a specific theme. This week, we are going to be looking at teen series. So in the world of young adult fiction, I would say series is probably one of the most popular things you can read. All the big movie franchises are based off of mega YA series like Twilight, Hunger Games, Divergent. So we're going to be looking at not those three specifically. We're going to be looking at some other recent ones, some that are already finished and completed so you can binge through them, or some that are just right in the middle. So we'll be giving you a mix today.
Yes, I think that's a good description there. And I know that you and I have both ordered teen fiction, so we know that series are where it's at right now. You
Absolutely.
can't just finish with one book. And all of the books that we're going to talk about today are available for you here at the library as well as online via Libby and Hoopla.
So, my first book today, Kaylee, is American Royals by Katharine McGee. Now, this is a newer series. The first book came out last year, and the second book just came out this year. So, this is one of those that's right in the middle. And it's a really interesting premise. It's the premise of what if, after the Revolutionary War, when the Americans won, instead of giving George Washington an oath of office to become president, he was actually offered a crown and become a king. So, this looks at what if America was run by royalty, kind of like England. So it's set in current day, and it follows two princes and their brother, the prince, and kind of just their life as royalty and kind of all the pressures they have to deal with. So the two sisters are Beatrice and Samantha. Beatrice is first in line for the throne, and she's actually the first woman who actually has the prospect of becoming queen. Before, in years past, even if the girl was the oldest, the law was that the first male child would become the heir. So she has all this pressure of possibly becoming the first female queen of America. So she has a lot of duty enforced on her, and she's kind of feeling the pressure. So she's feeling stifled, kind of is starting to wonder, how much do I really want to, go along with all of this? But, and also the fact that, her sister, Samantha, who's younger than her, has all this carefreeness about her life. No one looks at her. She's kind of overlooked. So she gets to do whatever she wants. So there's kind of that friction between them about their different responsibilities.
I'm feeling a little like Harry and William here.
Yes, does this sound at all familiar?
Yeah.
So then there's the prince, Jefferson is his name, and he is like the one all the tabloids cover because he's really handsome and, like who is he dating and who's he into and things like that. So he has a little love triangle going on with his Samantha's best friend, who he kind of, had this little interaction with that he hasn't really told any of his family about. And then there's also his ex, who's kind of like still wants to be with him. So there's like this little drama, and the way he interacts with his family is funny, like going to his sisters for advice and things. It kind of gives like Crazy Rich Asians vibes to me. I don't know, just like the whole royalty in a modern setting, in a place where you don't really think about it. So it's fun, it's entertaining, and I look forward to seeing where the series goes in the future.
That sounds cool. I like that it's not taking a fake country so much, but more like
Yeah.
an alternate history that brings you into present day. That's an interesting
Yeah.
concept. My first series that I want to tell you about is actually a fantasy series, and it just finished up. This trilogy ended last year. I think the last book came out. And this is called The Bone Witch by Chupeco. And it is about a young woman named Taya who comes from a family of witches. And one of her sisters has powers that specialize in forest and another in water. But Taya doesn't know what her power or specialty is yet. It's not something that's necessarily predictable. It's different for every person, and the powers show up at different times. And when Taya accidentally raises a family member from the dead, they learn that she is a bone witch, a necromancer.
Mm-hmm.
And bone witches are rare and somewhat feared among these people because their powers are sort of mysterious and, by nature kind of creepy. And luckily for Taya, she's kind of taken under the wing of this established bone witch, Michaela, who is going to help her train and learn more about her powers, which once they show up, like, are so powerful. Michaela's going to help her to become on the road to becoming a powerful Asha, which is a sort of master of the craft, capable of taking on the demons that occasionally pop up in this world. And the bone witches are the only ones who are able to sort of take on these demons. So it's a very powerful, pressure filled position that she's in. But this doesn't mean that things are great for Taya, because now that she knows her power, instead of it being sort of a celebrated thing, she's feared.
Yeah.
And she is told that it's likely that she's going to turn evil, which kind of it upends Taya's entire world.
Yeah.
And the first book in this trilogy really kind of sets the stage for all the subsequent tales. The author does some of this like amazing world building where she creates these vivid images of Taya's life and the world around her and the things that she encounters. And it really helps the reader kind of understand the rules of the world. There are a lot of things that are a little bit weird, a little different, and that's partly because she's creating this fantasy world. But it really helps to be able to kind of go through and establish in this first book so that you're familiar with all of the rules when things go forward.
Right.
The books are sort of action-packed with these amazing battle sequences and demon fights with magic and things in them. But they're also pretty relatable in some ways because Taya is trying to kind of discover herself and understand herself, and hope that she will be understood and loved still by those who are her family. And the author weaves in a lot of cultural interest as well, with a lot of Asian ceremonies and things that are sort of adapted to kind of fit into this, especially related to like Filipino and Japanese cultures. And that's been really, really praised in this series as well for representing diversity and diverse stories in YA.
That is very neat. I also really, like you said, the relatable part. I was just thinking, I feel like some of my favorite YA stories I've read are kind of about like that outsider that maybe people are a little afraid of at first, but then, the protagonist kind of proves themselves. It kind of reminds me of Giver a little bit, where he's like, you're supposed to get your power and you don't know it yet, but
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of Giver as well.
yeah. So that I love that concept. So my next book series is actually a series that wasn't originally intended to be a series. Is the Dear Martin series by Nick Stone, and it was originally supposed to be a standalone book, but the success was so enormous for the author that she actually was able to find a really cool way to continue it, and I believe there's going to be another one. So it's another one that's kind of in the middle of the series. There's just a second one that came out this year. But the first one is the story of Justice, and Justice is a senior in high school at a really prestigious elite school. He has ambitions of going to Yale and having this academic like life, and he's really trying to be a great person. People like know him as being always willing to help out somebody. Well, one night this kind of gets him in trouble, this willingness to help. One night, his ex-girlfriend, who he still kind of has some feelings for, she gets drunk, and he's trying to be a nice person. He doesn't want her to drive drunk. So he's like, I'm going to help you drive home. So he's doing this honorable thing, but then he's pulled aside by the cops. And the cop assumes the worst of him. And it really it's like a life-changing moment for Justice, because it really, even though he's a Black man, and even though he, believes in, that he has endured racism, this is his most in-person experience with that, and it really changes how he thinks. And to cope with like how he's thinking about this, he begins writing letters in a journal to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh.
It's really endearing because in these letters, so the story alternates between this third person narration of Justice's life, and then with these letters he writes to Dr. King. And in these letters, I think Justice shows such a, it's just really a lovable heart because he tackles the issues of the day, but yet he has such of this heart that he wants love in the world, and he wants goodness, and he wants to do good and do the right thing. So it's almost like he's asking Dr. King for help, like how, in this world, can we do good? It has like this almost optimist outlook to a lot of the relevant, sad and tragic things that are going on in the world. And it's a really heart-wrenching juxtaposition between some of the things he endures in this book and then like the piece of his heart that you see in the letters. And I've always liked letter telling books. So I like how the storytelling mode of that. So the second one is called Dear Justice, and it's actually another new character writing letters to Justice. And then I think the third one is going to have even another character. So that's the Dear Martin series. And I just think it's an introspective kind of touching series.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds very timely too.
Yeah.
And something that teens could very easily relate to.
Yeah. What's your last one, Cailey?
My last book is called The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. So this is a trilogy as well. And this one finished up a few years ago. But, I still think about this series all the time. So it's The Fifth Wave.
Okay.
The first wave took out the electricity and really all of the modern conveniences, including cars. The second wave was a literal wave, huge tsunamis that took out the coasts. The third wave brought sickness, a plague of sorts that knocked out over 90% of the population. And the fourth wave brought the silencers. They look like you, but their mission is to take you out. The fifth wave is still coming. And that's where the book begins.
Whoa, I'm scared.
I already have you hooked. All right.
Yes.
So the book is primarily about Cassie Sullivan, who is a teenage girl with her baby brother who is just 5 years old, and she is trying to just kind of make it through life. And she and her brother Sam have made it through these first four waves, but they know that the fifth wave is coming. Now, you might ask, what is attacking? And the answer is aliens. Now, don't lose interest here because even though it's this alien invasion series, in the first book, you really hardly see anything. It's not until like the back half of the book even that you see it, but there's this building tension because Cassie spends so much time alone in fear, and it's kind of like a barren landscape that she's in because, as I said, all these waves have taken out the majority of the population, and there's just like impending doom that's like behind the scenes but that you feel at all times because there's this tension, and she like runs through the woods and she tries to stay out of sight and everything. When the alien figures kind of do appear in this, they're not going to be green and squishy. They look just like everyone else, and that makes it harder. And Cassie's just trying to survive amongst this crazy world and get back to her brother, who she's been separated from in the first book. The series is a trilogy, and it finished up a few years back, but like I said, I still love it. And the author builds this really impressive world that is not too far from our own, because this is kind of like dystopian story in that, something big and bad has happened, and this is the landscape after the fact. But the author also tells the story through multiple viewpoints. So Cassie's sort of the main character, but there are a number of characters throughout the series who are narrating. And this helps give you this different perspective on how all of these waves have affected different people and what's happening now, especially even giving you different perspectives on Cassie because she interacts with a lot of them. And sometimes it's even younger children. So it's not super far removed from our world, which is one of those things that kind of always like gets to me in
Yeah.
books like this. Because like much like a zombie apocalypse story or another dystopia, the author's going to show a lot of things that give this stark contrast to the life before, like shopping malls or like snack foods or something like that. That just you're like, they can't even have that anymore. And as the series goes on, the world becomes more dangerous and it is hard to know who you can actually trust. And there's also that fear of like, is there going to be an end to this? And if
Yeah.
so, what? And I will say that I generally am not a fan of alien books. And when I actually picked up this book, I did not know it was going to be aliens.
Yeah.
But the series feels much like a lot of other like dystopian novels. So if you like those, or even like a Hunger Games kind of feel, where it's a future that something's gone on,
Yeah.
or even like fans of The Walking Dead or something, where it's kind of that like distorted future,
Yeah.
super creepy and fun.
Wow, yeah. And especially this year where it feels like how many waves have been this year, you
I
know?
know, right?
Yeah. So
Exactly.
that's a fun concept. I actually like the idea of like alien. I think that sounds fun. So I would be interested. And I just want to see Cassie reunite with her brother. That's got me. You gripped me, Cailey. So I'm invested already. But yeah. Thank you everybody for joining us this week. Next week we have a really fun topic. We're going to be looking at the National Book Award, which is actually the winners for this year are going to be revealed November 18th, so coming very soon. So in anticipation of that, we're going to be looking at some of the nominees this year and also some of the previous winners and nominees from past years. So it's a
Yeah.
really prestigious award. They always have really good winners of really, you can really recommend those books for sure. So I think that'll be a fun one.
Yes, and I think that there's no big award ceremonies or anything this year, so it's kind of fun to highlight this.
Yeah, fun. So
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you will be willing to pick up one of these series and start binge reading. Happy reading.